Hey all, Pete here. So I just shot a video on kind of scouting for coyote stands, coyote calling stands. I want to shoot a second video on stand basics, and some of this is going to be sort of a more detailed review from a few of the things I just briefly touched on in the scouting video for predator calling. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about fox calling on this too. I'm not going to talk about bobcat calling because I've never called a bobcat in on purpose, and so I don't know what I did in that location that made the bobcat come in. I'm not a big bobcat guy. All right, so some of this, like I said, is going to sound familiar from the other video, but let's talk about what we want to look for in a coyote stand. Okay, quick review. One, can I hide the vehicle? So from where I'm calling from, if a coyote's coming in from any of the three directions where I have a shot, if he's coming in behind, it doesn't matter if he runs in the vehicle. I'm not ever going to see him, okay? But if he's coming in from any of the avenues of approach that I'm calling towards, you better not be able to see the vehicle. And you got to really think about this, because if there's a big giant hill in front of you, you might not be able to see the vehicle from where you're sitting, but a coyote coming over that hill might be able to, right? So you want to think about, can I hide the vehicle? Two, second stand fundamental, absolute, these are like the rules of engagement for predator calling coyotes. Hidden vehicle, second stand basic. If at all possible, you need an avenue of approach to that stand that is hidden or semi-hidden. So like I said, I have a spot I like to call where there's these washes that go down towards this valley. And they go along every half mile or so for several miles, 6-7 miles down this one road. I love that spot because I can park at the head of any one of those washes, and all it is just rocks, dirt, and cheatgrass. It's not anything noisy. And I can walk down through that wash till I get out away from everything. And the wash makes lots of turns, so coyotes couldn't see me coming down that wash. There are too many turns. I can creep right out there and then swing out to where I want to call from and get sat down. So if you can approach, hidden, that's best. If you can't and you have to go over a hill, do it quick. Crouch down and get over that hill quick, because you're going to be announcing yourself to the entire area when you go over a skyline. All right? So if at all possible, avoid skylining yourself. You know what I mean? It's important. Third, when you're going out to the stand to call, and when you're leaving the stand, do it in silence. What I do, I roll up to where I'm gonna park. I park and I turn off my Jeep and I sit there for about 5 minutes. Drink a little coffee, whatever. Then I open up my Jeep door quietly. I get my coat on, I get my gloves on, I get my face mask on, I get all my camo, everything that I'm gonna have on me, so I don't have to moving around at all once I get to the stand. I do that quietly. If someone's with me, they know you do not talk. The quickest way to never get taken on a coyote calling hunt with me is to start talking when we get out of the car, or to slam your friggin' door. Okay, so get out, get your stuff on quietly, close the doors, just push them, don't slam them, and then quietly walk out. If you have to talk, it should be a whisper right into their ear or hand signals. Don't talk. Okay, you're assuming there is a coyote in the area. Okay, you're not calling a coyote in from 5 miles away that doesn't know you're there. I mean, you've entered the area where you're assuming there to be coyotes, so keep your friggin' mouth shut. Don't make noise. And you go out to the stand as quietly as possible and break branches and leaves and twigs and kick rocks and take a leak. And just get out there quiet as an Indian. And when you get to the spot you're going to call, sit down quickly and stop moving around. Okay, so I get out to the stand, I get sat down quickly, especially if I have to go over something right before I'm going to call. I get over it and get sat right down. I don't sit down one place and then I don't like this and move around, and I'll just sit down, stop moving. Don't get your gun ready. Don't do anything. Just sit down and stop moving. And so I sit down and I stop moving for about 5 minutes again. All right, and I'm just looking. And what I'm doing is I'm looking for things that look like they might be coyote, like that would look like a coyote. I'm seeing if there's a coyote in the area. I've walked in on coyotes before. All right. So I'm just kind of looking at the terrain. And towards the end of that 5 minutes, I'll slide my rangefinder out real easy, real slow, and I'll range a few landmarks, and then I'll slide it back in so that I know a good idea of how far I'm shooting based on the landmarks. I already have the call in my mouth. I use diaphragm calls, so I put it in my mouth before I get sat down, before I get to my final stopping point. So my call's ready to go, and I sit down. Okay, when I'm done calling, I wait about 5 minutes to make sure nothing else comes in or I didn't miss one sitting out there. That happens sometimes. You're done calling, like, man, nothing come in. And then you look over and you're like, oh, crap, is that a coyote sitting right there? How long has he been sitting there? And you just missed him. You just didn't see him. So, so I wait about 5 minutes. Then I stand up slowly, keep my gun loaded, ready. Just kind of look around real slow. Glance around the area, scan the area for a couple minutes, and then slowly move away from the area. And I go back to my Jeep as quiet as I came in. Whether I killed a coyote or not, quiet as I came in. Move to the next location. All right. Wind. You need to be in a crosswind or a quartering wind. You don't want a wind in your face because they're going to come in behind you. You don't want a wind behind you because it's going to blow your scent out right towards them. So you want a wind blowing this way, or quartering. Okay, you don't want anything else, trust me, at least in Idaho where I call. Some guys in the east will call with a wind behind them and things like that based because they're calling like food plots and thick cover and stuff, and there's ways to work it so that you can do that because they're most likely to come in a different way. But that's not something I know a lot about. All right, so remember, the wind is important. Good woodsmanship always means paying attention to the wind, no matter what you're hunting. Okay, but with predators, it's really important. Now, you want to set yourself up so that you're looking. So I'm facing the camera here, but if the wind is blowing this way, I want to turn about at a 45, and I'm going to put my gun on my shooting sticks at about a 45 towards downwind. They're most likely to come in downwind, but they do it often enough not. I mean, this happens enough times, contrary to what I think is going to happen, that you can't bank on them coming in downwind because coyotes are predictably unpredictable, it seems like. But usually coyotes will try to circle downwind to see if they can smell what is making the noise. Okay, that they tend to do that. Not always, but tend to. I've had plenty of them run straight at me. I've had coyotes pop up on the upwind side. I've had all kinds of weird stuff happen. But your odds are they're probably going to circle downwind, especially the more pressure that's on them and the more people that are calling them. Okay, and the later in the season it gets. So I like to point downwind a little bit, but I'm always watching over here. Okay. While you're calling, I use diaphragm calls. So I don't have to do anything with my hands if I don't want to. I might do this a little bit, like for a while, and then I might put this hand up like this to blow sound that way more for a while, just to make it sound like things are moving around a little bit. Some guys will do this. I don't like to move more than I have to. So that diaphragm calls in my mouth, and I'm just gonna not move much except slowly move my head to watch, make sure I can see the avenues of approach. If you're using a handheld call, a closed reed call, they're the easiest to use. They're what I started with when I was 14. I still use them sometimes, don't get me wrong, but those you gotta kind of work a little bit to get some variation in the sound. The cool thing about diaphragm calls is you can vary the sound up with your own acoustics of your mouth and everything. Open reed call, you're going to have to do some movement. You got to cant the call a little bit in your hand, and and you can kind of cup it a little bit too. So there's going to be some movement. Electronic calls, good thing about electronic calls is you don't have to move to operate them, and you can set them away from you so that the coyote's not going to be focused on you. It's going to be focused on the sound where the call's coming from. But I don't like electronic calls. I don't like them. And I see value in them for certain applications, but I have called more coyotes in with diaphragm calls purchased from MFK Game Calls than any other call of any type ever. So take that for what it's worth. So I'm calling. I'm not moving around when I'm calling. I'm not, no excess movement at all. Only movement is when I range and if I have to switch calls. Before I start calling, I'll set a couple other calls just on my leg so that I can kind of let my one call fall out of my mouth and reach one real slow and put one in. If you have to move slow. All right. Next thing, sit in the shadows. If at all possible, sit in the shadows. It's always better to have the sun behind you if you can. All right, because then if you're in the shadows and the sun's behind you, it's going to be harder for a coyote to see you. Okay, if they're looking directly in the sun and you're in the shadow. So sit in the shadows. Placement. Now, if you're with somebody, there are a couple ways that you can position yourselves. I'm going to cover those in a different video when I talk about my 3 favorite stands to make. But if you're going to sit with each other, the best thing to do is to sit kind of, not actually back to back, but kind of like this. One guy kind of facing this way, one guy kind of facing this way. So in the Marine Corps, we talked about shooting lanes, right? You had your shooting lane overlapped another person's shooting lane, overlapped another person's shooting lane. Or bird hunters, if you're walking a cornfield for pheasants, your shooting lane is here, next guy's is here, and they all kind of overlap a little bit. Kind of think about it that way if you're with somebody else. One piece of advice, if you're with somebody else and you're able to do this, it's good for one guy to take a rifle and one guy to take a shotgun and have the shotgun guy sit facing the way that's going to have a short approach from a coyote. Like if there's a hill 50 yards in front of that guy that a coyote's got to come over to come into the call, we'll give that guy the shotgun with the buckshot, number 4 buck, because he'll be able to dump a coyote at 50 yards or less with number 4 buck. And then if the other side's got this big open area out 300-400 yards, then give that guy the rifle, and that way he can if a coyote comes in and it hangs up out there 100-200 yards, he's got the rifle shot. Does that make sense? So, all right. Finally, when you get up to leave, again, leave the same way you came in. Get up, quiet, leave quietly. Don't start shooting the shit as you walk back to the Jeep. You're like, oh man, I thought that was a coyote, but oh, I know, it wasn't that crazy, because a coyote might have come in. You just didn't see him, and he might still be in the area. And first of all, if you only go a half mile down the road or something because nothing came in there, but you're in a good area, you still have a chance of calling that one in. And this happened to me. Okay, I was calling one day, and I had a coyote come in kind of behind me. And it took me forever to get turned around to get a shot at him, and I missed because all I could see was his head, and I was shooting kind of twisted back, and I missed him. And so that's fine. I just sat there and I waited and called a little longer. Nothing happened, and I'm like, I'm gonna see if I can still get him. So I snuck down, about half mile, got set up again, and started calling. And lo and behold, coyote pops over the hill, and I can't prove it was the same coyote, but I didn't go very far. So anything that heard me in my second location was hearing me in my first one. All right. So, if you're in good country, it's, you don't need to drive 5 miles down the road to the next stand. If you're in really good country and nothing came in, you don't know for sure. Something could have come in that you didn't see. So get out quiet. Don't make noise. Don't be stupid. Get in the Jeep quietly. Drive down a little ways, just half mile, or whatever. You don't have to go as far. Get back out into that country again. But if you stand up and start walking out, having a good old time, you've just busted yourselves, and you don't even realize it. And you've reduced the chance of that coyote ever coming into a call in the future, and you didn't even know it because you didn't even know he was there. So get in quiet, get out quiet, okay? So those are my stand basics. Now, fox, a word about fox. Fox are not real bright. Fox usually will come flying into a call. I had one run over the top of me one time. I was laying prone in the snow and something literally ran over the top of me, and I spun and it was a fox, and I shot him running away from me. But if you're in heavy coyote country, coyotes and foxes don't get along real well. Coyotes are known to kill fox. So in southern Idaho, we find fox around farms and around brushy, thick canyons. And fox tend to be either around farms or up high in the timber. That middle area is more of the coyote domain. So the foothills, the big deserts, that kind of stuff. You don't see a lot of coyotes up real high in southern Idaho. But it's not unusual for my friends who snowmobile to say they were clear up high on a snowmobile track and a red fox ran across the trail in front of them. And they see them around farms. You may not see them, but they're there. Like that's where I catch a lot of foxes, around farmland and some of the rocky canyons that have creeks in the bottom that run around in southern Idaho, drainages, down in the low farm country. So how do you call that stuff? Well, I like to sit on field corners, close to those canyons. I like to sit in those islands of unfarmable land in the middle of fields that are full of rocks and sagebrush and grass, and they're not farmable, but there's cover. I like to sit in those. I'll sit on corner posts, where there's a fence corner. I'll sit if I've got a thick line between two fields of brush, maybe a pivot corner that isn't cut, things like that on the farmland. Just sitting down in bare farmland isn't what I'm saying. I'm saying like if there's a drainage or an old canal with lots of cover, things like that, places where there's food that the fox are after, birds especially, they wreak havoc on birds, small game, things like that. And obviously if you see sign, fox there. So if you go back to my first video about scouting locations, you got to make sure the animals you want to call are in the area. So if you're seeing fox sign around these types of places, then that's what I like to do. Field corners, pivot corners that aren't cut, that are close to brush, any field corners or fence post corners that are close to these canyons and little creeks and old canal drainages that we have in southern Idaho where the fox are living. Those are all good places to sit and call fox. I've even sat up against hay bales in a field where I've seen fox out hunting in the morning or in the evening in these fields that the hay's been baled in those big round bales and stuff, and it's just sitting out there. Before they're picked up, I'll just wear my tan Carhartt stuff and just sit down with my shooting sticks back against one of those hay bales, wind going the right way, and start calling, doing that in the morning or evening, and I've called fox in that way. But when you're out in those big deserts and in the foothills and stuff, going into the mountains, and like a lot of the BLM land, that's way more of the coyote land than it is fox land. So you're going to catch the fox around the farms and the drainages around farms, waterways around farms, or up higher in the timber. In northern Idaho, we've got a lot of silver fox and other things too, so in the timber. So anyway, that's my word on fox. Okay. All right, that's all I got for stand basics. Hide the vehicle, hidden approach, quiet going in and quiet going out, sitting in the shadows with the sun behind it if possible, sitting in a crosswind or a quartering wind, orienting yourself slightly downwind, facing downwind, get no movement, minimal movement, slow movement, hidden avenues of approach in and out of the stand. Stand calling length, final thing, I guess. Guys always say 20 minutes. I sit for 45. And most of my coyotes come in between 5 and 15 minutes or 30 and 40 minutes. Okay? So, all right. That's it. Remember, God is great. Guns are good. Freedom is precious. See you in my next video.